Hello, come on in. I hear you've got some questions for me to answer. I will answer them now. All right, follow me. Welcome to my home. So how many days a week should we do floor bar to see results? Good question. And by now you've probably checked out the course with India Rose, which is on my platform, which I highly, highly recommend for the course in particular, and for really just getting in depth with floor bar, because it is very much a methodology, much like ballet. You really want to do it 3 times a week at least. I mean, really it should become part of your routine. So eventually it's your warm-up routine. You do it daily before class, and if you're resting or on a rest day or recovering from injury, it's perfect to do. Next question. How long will it take to see significant change in turnout? Difficult question. Everyone is so individual. And I think with turnout, let's sit down for a minute. With turnout, it's really difficult to understand how each one of us will progress, because you may have difficulty with the flexibility of your turnout. It may be strength. It may be both. And everyone's really different. So the main thing is to not compare yourself to other people's journeys with turnout, and make sure you're doing smart things for it and being consistent with it. So floor bar, like we mentioned, is amazing for turnout, as well as making sure you're stretching religiously and opening up the range in your hips. For me, that was a big one, because without actually stretching, it was hard to condition optimally to really get the results. So be consistent. Don't worry so much about the time it's taking. Just focus on doing the things you need to do to make it better in the first place, and it will sort itself out, and you'll see improvement relatively quickly. Can an 18-year-old beginner go professional? I would say to be super honest, I would say it's quite unlikely that you're going to become professional if you're a beginner and you're starting at 18. 15 in ballet is probably the cutoff when things start to get very late, because often, we start at 9-10 years old. So I would say if you're starting at 18, you're really going to get to probably quite a good level, but an average level, and you could get to a very good level when you're sort of 20, 25, but by then it's still going to be difficult for you to end up professional. So you can probably get to a good amateur level, but likely not professional. But try not to take that too much to heart. Ballet can still be super fun and enjoyable, and you can still do it religiously and be super passionate about it. Next question. How are Vaganova exams graded? And can your teacher give corrections during the actual exam? Good question. During the exam, often you may hear the teacher screaming out and saying things like "Stayat" or "Bedro," these little comments like head or hip or stay, which are really just reminders, sort of like a coach on the sidelines looking at your student from, let's say we're in tennis, and you just shout out little reminders to them. But one can't say very long specific corrections, because it is very much a demonstration, and they're more just reminders rather than long, lengthy corrections. And in terms of how we're graded, I'm not entirely sure how we're actually graded, but in general, the people who have been asked to leave, because obviously I was in the school for 4 years, so there was 2 years where there was quite a few cuttings happening with the students, and those that left, even though they seemed fine, I think a lot of it is determined on obviously where their level is at that moment, but also what's the likelihood that they can progress and improve and keep up with the demands that they'll have on them for the following years, because obviously things get a lot more difficult as we progress, and we can tell quite significantly in those later years who will be able to handle it technically and who can't, in which case the school doesn't want to waste their time trying to help these people catch up. And also for the student, if they already know it's unlikely, then the earlier they can go out and either find an alternative or start something new, another passion. So let's continue. How to deal with foot cramps. So foot cramps often happen when your toes, well, you could be really tired from all the point work, so it's not necessarily a strength issue, but it can be a strength thing. So if you're not quite doing enough foot exercises, or your feet are not used to the strain, such as pointing the feet and just used to using those intrinsic ballet muscles, then the feet can cramp up. So I really recommend rolling out. I do have a course, it's called the Amazing Feet course, and it has so much detail in it, as well as how to even just warm up the feet. But rolling out can be super helpful, as well as making sure you're working those intrinsic muscles of the feet daily. I think with feet exercises, it needs to be a daily thing that you do. It can't be something that you do once a week. Your feet are like your hands, like a pianist's hands, and we've got to really train them regularly. And if your feet are just tired from the point work, then again, rolling out, having a nice warm Epsom salts bath, even just foot bath or ice bath, can be really helpful for the feet. So it's all about recovery as well. So next question, how to stop sinking and sitting back in my hips. So sitting in the hips often happens if we're a little bit weaker in the glutes, and we tend to sink down, as well as if the inner thighs are a little bit weak. So that nice wrap of the legs. So again, floor bar is going to be amazing for that. But then targeted exercises for the sides of the hips and the glutes, so that you're just very supported. Often when we tendu to the front, we sink back in the legs. I talk about that a lot on my Instagram, but at Ballet with Isabella. But as we tendu, you always want to sense like you're coming more forwards on the hips, more forwards on the hips. I always like to imagine where our hips are up against an imaginary wall when we do our tendus, so that whenever I tendu, I'm never going to leave that imaginary wall and sit back. I'm always going to stay really tall, really tall. So actually, my glute muscles are working harder every time the leg releases and coming up more in the hips. Another good imagery is to think about the sitting bone and the hip bone being in line with each other all the time, because whenever you're sitting, it's likely that the sitting bone is out, and you want to always scoop it in. So whatever you're doing, is that in alignment? Then you'll be likely much taller on the supporting leg and not sitting. But definitely keep working on the wrap of the legs. That's very difficult, and something that has to be really heavily worked on, so that the hip flexors are not tight, the sides of the hips are not too tight either in the IT band, because when those areas are tight, naturally your hips are actually turned in and they roll in, and we want to create this flatness in the inner thighs and utilizing inner thighs, backs of glutes. It's a lot to work on, which is why I heavily talk about this in the intensives, but also my platform is heavily focused on this, so that we have tons of exercises to work on that. Let's continue. What's a good workout plan for an adult ballet dancer? Really good question. I think with adults, and I love working with adults, especially the ones who come to the intensives, they're so passionate and serious about this, and I find them actually really inspirational, mainly because they are also really self-motivated. You know, with students, we're kind of all motivated to get to a goal of being pro. But with adults, they are just so passionate about it themselves, you know, for their own sake and for their own motivation, and it's really great. So a workout plan for adults, obviously, we're dealing with their busy lives. They're working, they have their full-time jobs most of the time, and it can be hard to squeeze everything in. But I would say whatever your goal is, try to, and if you have things that you're working on, such as often with adults, it's the feet, the flexibility and the turnout muscles, try to target each day fitting one of those things in. We'll just perch here by the fire, it's nice and warm. Try to fit one of those things in, because it can be really quite challenging to work on everything daily. Whereas if you do hamstrings one day for half an hour, the next day we'll work on our turnout muscles, and the final day we'll do our feet and circulate that. It's really all about those tiny habits that build up over time. So if you were doing half an hour or 2 sets, you know, in the week of hamstrings, So half an hour on a Monday, half an hour on a Friday with other things in between, and you do that for a month, you're definitely going to see massive improvement as opposed to trying to cram everything in on one day and not really getting anything done. It's the same when you're just focused and you procrastinate. When you have a whole list of things you need to do, we end up barely doing any of it because we are just too overwhelmed and it's just too much to take on. And much like, maybe you run a business, you allocate days to certain things and you allocate certain amounts of time to certain things, and therefore you tick things off your list. And the same comes with your conditioning routine. So the key thing is to write down what are the top things you need to work on, and then giving yourself targeted times in the week for each thing that's manageable. I stress manageable. So a lot of my principal members on my website, this is exactly what we do. We look at their life, look at their schedule, and map out what they need to do and where we can slot it in so that they can gain the consistent results that they desire. So next question. This is a really good question. Which muscles to strengthen for pirouettes? For pirouettes, I would really suggest it's all about the turnout muscles again. The back of the glutes, deep rotators, inner thighs, as well as obviously the releve sensation. So really understanding the high demi point. If you are an adult who's written this, obviously doesn't tell me exactly who you are, but it can be really hard to get on that high demi point. And so it doesn't quite matter how much you're strong in other areas. If you're not establishing that high demi point, you'll find it hard to access the glutes and the deep rotators for the retire. And then with pirouettes, if you have worked up to the point where you found a good position, but you struggle when you actually turn, it's likely you're unable to find that sensation very quickly. So when you turn, you're losing the position straight away. So it's key to take things one step at a time. You found the position, film yourself in slow motion, and then don't throw the form away just because you've given it force. So when you're doing a single pirouette, you really want to just focus on going into the position and holding that through the quarters of the room so that it's not just force trying to whip yourself around and losing all sense of awareness of the body and the positioning. So really almost imagine you're taking those photos of every quarter you're doing, photo. So you do a whole turn and then you come down. But I stress it's turnout muscles and it's understanding those deep rotators so that you can then lock yourself in place. Understanding the shoulders as well, connected to the hips. So where your shoulders are, your hips are likely to follow. There's a nice connection of energy there. So we talk about that a lot in the intensives and again on the platform, but those are things I would definitely focus on. So let's stand up again. So tips for memorizing combinations. So with combinations, it's tricky because again, we're all individual and we all memorize things differently. So some people are more audio orientated, some people are more visual. And another thing is some people are kind of take it in themselves if they're more doing it and demoing it with their hands and with their body. I've even had it when people next to me are saying it out loud as the teacher's doing it, which can be distracting for me, but if they're saying it out loud, it goes in better for them. So I think it's all about understanding you and what works for you. Another thing that really is helpful is stacking. So stacking the exercise. Often in ballet, especially combinations, the teacher will probably work in quite a structured way, and it's all about stacking the combination. Counts are in 8 most of the time. So it's like, okay, there's that first 8 and stack it in your mind like a stack of cards. So that first 8 is 2 tendus, 3 to the side plie. That's one stack. And then the following stack, so that you're taking it one stack at a time. So again, it's not overwhelming and you're not stressed out about memorizing many things. Same with the variation. Often it's going to be a bit in the center, diagonal, and something else. That would be a stack. So stacking can be really useful. Putting together the chunks of the exercise or the chunks of the variation. So I highly recommend and practice. You can look at stuff on YouTube. I actually have a YouTube video about learning exercises and the best way to do it. But you can also practice by watching some World Ballet Day classes and trying to remember the combination and trying different strategies. So next question, how to keep improving even when teachers aren't correcting me. So if a teacher's not correcting you, really take things into your own hands and remember the long game. The long game is you want to be pro. This teacher is likely not going to be in your life for the long term. And so in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter if they're ignoring you in the grand scheme of your career. So although it kind of sucks and we don't want that to happen, if it does happen, have a thick skin and you'll actually take something away from it, such as better skills in self-correcting, understanding your body and what you need to do. So use the time with your teacher to listen to others' corrections and a time to self-practice. So if there's anything you know you're working on, use that time to try to apply it and self-motivate, push yourself. It's another skill you can get better at is self-motivation, not relying on someone else like the teacher to motivate you. And I know we want to get feedback and we want to get those corrections, but you can still learn so much from hearing from other people. And I do recommend, if it's possible, to get a coach outside. Now, although a lot of schools don't like you doing that, I've always done that, and not so much at Vaganova because they're great teachers there and I got a lot of attention, but it is something to really look into, because don't be afraid about doing that. You do what you got to do and you do what you need to do to get improvement, because if the teacher's ignoring you, then I've got to go and seek outside help, and it's completely fine as far as I'm concerned. So one more question and then I've got to get dinner on. How to overcome being a shy dancer. And yeah, being shy is really, really tough. But usually we get over this as we get older anyway, because we progress and we end up knowing a bit more who we are and what we're about, and we gain that confidence. But it's also a challenge for you. And remember, much like when you're playing a role in a ballet, you're someone else, you're not yourself. So when you do each exercise, think of yourself as that, like, now I'm doing a jeté and I am a confident dancer who does her jeté, rather than I'm Sarah who's shy and I'm scared of doing something wrong. If you think of it that way, then you'll kind of be removed from your own thoughts and you'll be thinking about the mood of the combination and the style of the movement you're doing, and also the type of dancer you want to become. And think about each mood is a different character. This adage is a soulful dancer. This confident grand battement is a Kitri type character. And that way as well, you'll be developing various different styles of artistry within your basic ballet combinations. And it's all about also faking it till you make it. If you act confident and you be confident, eventually you will become confident. So guys, let's wrap it up there. And I hope you found this super helpful today, and I look forward to answering some more of your questions. Definitely leave your comments down below. Check out my platform where there's tons of classes and courses on there to help you reach your goals, as well as my podcast at Ballet with Isabella, A Dancer's Mindset. And I'll speak to you very soon. Thanks for stopping by. Bye for now.